afternoon, TikTok. Thank you for TikTok. Oh my gosh. I was just on TikTok a little while ago. YouTube. My bad. Welcome everyone to yet another installment of Reading Wicked. For any of you who have not joined me before on any of my book readings, hi, welcome. My name is Mimi, and every Monday from like 8 to 9, 8 to 9-ish, 30, Mondays Eastern Standard Time, we do book readings here on this channel. I This book is not the first that I have read from. I got started doing my book readings on TikTok and have kind of transferred all of that over here to YouTube. So if you have missed any of the previous readings of this book or any of the other readings from any of the other books that I have read from so far, do not fret. I have all of them on a playlist ready to go in sequential order. So all you have to do is just pick whatever book you want to listen to me read and just hit play. So, this, as you can tell, we're just about halfway done with reading Wicked. So even to kind of give you the Reader's Digest version of where we are right now would be a lot. So I would recommend that you step away from this video for now, go back, watch the other videos, get caught up, and then when you're done getting caught up, watch this one. You'll see me again next week with the next installment of reading this book, so you're not going to miss anything. Don't worry. But if you do want to hang out, by all means, please feel free to do so. Chat amongst yourselves in the comment section. I enjoy engaging with you guys as much as I can. I try not to break too much when I read because I want people to listen to the story and engage with the story. So I try not to talk too much to my audience when I'm reading. But I enjoy like reading the comments later, watching the engagement, like kind of as I take a break, a water break, a breath break, something. So, for anyone who is going to be seeing this video later, this is not, if you have seen the Broadway show, if you've watched the first of the two movies, this is a darker version of those. There's a lot of adult themes in this book. There's adult language, there's adult themes. So if you're sitting here with your kids thinking, oh, cool, Wicked, we love that. This is not for little ones. This is not for little ears. It's just not. So you've been warned. There are technically some spoilers. If you haven't seen the Broadway show and if you haven't seen the movie, there are some kind of spoilers in this book. I hesitate to even say that because this book, the show and the movie approach this story differently. So there's like very few spoilers, but you can kind of see, like if you know both forms of media, you can kind of see where like the show and where the movie was going based on this book. But I just figured it's, better to give you guys a chance to have a heads up. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. So, you've been warned thoroughly, aptly. JMG, are you asking me if I'm Amish? I'm not Amish. I don't. If you meant to ask Amish, no, I'm not Amish. And if you didn't mean to ask if I'm Amish, I'm curious what you actually meant. But hi, Miss Debbie. How are you? Happy Monday. You're a great-grandmother. Yay! Congratulations. That's so exciting. Oh my gosh. I'm going to pretend this is a celebratory beverage, but it's just water. But congratulations. All right. We're about 5 minutes in. That's enough jibber jabbering for right now. So yeah, we're going to read for about an hour, and if you guys want to stick around, feel free to do so. But if not, I will catch you next week. Thanks for stopping by. And here we go. We are in Gillikin. part of the book called Gilligan, Chapter 5. Early one morning, when the world was hoary with rimfrost, Gramatik arrived with a note for Glinda. Amma Clutch, it seemed, was on her way out. Glinda and her roommates hurried to the infirmary. The head met them there and led them to a windowless alcove. Amma Clutch was thrashing about in the bed and talking to the pillowcase. "Don't put up with me," she was saying wildly. For what will I ever do for you? I will abuse your good nature, ducky, and rest my oily locks upon your fine clothes weave, and I will be picking with my teeth at your lacy appliqued edge. You are a stupid nuisance to allow it, I say. I don't care about notions of service. It's all bunk, I tell you, bunk." Amma Clutch, it's me," said Glinda. "Listen, dear, it's me. It's your little Galinda." Amma Clutch turned her head from side to side. "Your protest is insulting to your forebears," she went on, rolling her eyes toward the pillowcase again. "Those cotton plants on the banks of Restwater didn't allow themselves to be harvested so you could lie down like a mat and let any filthy person slobber all over you with night drool. It don't make a lick of sense." "Amma," Glinda wept, "please, you're raving." "Aha, I see you have nothing to say to that," said Amma Clutch with satisfaction. "Come back, Amma, come back. One more time before you go." "Oh, sweet Lurline, this is dreadful," Nanny said. "Darlings, if I ever get like this, poison me, will you?" "She's going. I can see it," Elphaba said. "I saw it enough in Quadling country. I know the signs. Glinda, say what you need to say, quickly." "Madame Morrible, may I have privacy?" Glinda said. "I will stay by your side and support you. It's my duty to my girls," said the head, settling her ham-like hands determinedly on her waist. But Elphaba and Nanny got up and elbowed her out of the alcove, down the hall, and through the door, and closed it and locked it. Nanny clucked all the while, saying, "Now, isn't it nice of you, Madam Head? But no need at all." Glinda gripped Amma Clutch's hand. Beads of white sweat were forming like potato water on the servant's forehead. She struggled to pull her hand away, but her strength was going. "Amma Clutch, you're dying," Glinda said, "and it's my fault." "Oh, stop," Elphaba said. "It is," Glinda said fiercely. "It is." "I'm not arguing that," said Elphaba. "I just mean cut yourself out of the conversation. This is her death, not your interview with the unnamed god. Come on, do something." Glinda grabbed the hands, both hands, even tighter. "I am going to magic you back," she said between gritted teeth. "Amma Clutch, you do as I say. I'm still your employer, and you're better, and you have to obey me. Now listen to this spell and behave yourself." Amma's teeth gnashed, the eyes rolled, and the chin twisted knobbily as if trying to impale some invisible demon in the air above her bed. Glinda's eyes shut and her jaw worked, and a thread of sound, syllables incoherent even to herself, came spooling out from her blanched lips. "Hope you don't explode her like a sandwich," muttered Elphaba. Glinda ignored this. She hummed and worked. She rocked and panted. Amma Clutch's eyelids moved so frantically over the closed eyes that it looked as if her eye sockets were chewing her own eyes. "Magicordium sensus ovinda clenx," Glinda concluded out loud. "And if that doesn't do it, I give up. Even the smells and bells of a full kit wouldn't help, I think." On the straw pallet, Amma Clutch fell back. A little blood ran from the outer edge of each eye, but the wild turning motion of the focus had shuttered itself down. "Oh, my dear," she murmured. "So you're all right then. Or am I dead now?" "Not yet," said Glinda. "And yes, dear Amma, yes, I'm fine. But, sweetheart, I think you're going." "Of course I am. The wind is here. Can't you hear it?" Amma Clutch said. "No matter. Oh, there's Elfie, too. Goodbye, my ducks. Stay out of the wind until the time is right for you, or you'll be blown in the wrong direction." Glinda said, "I'm a Clutch. I have something to say to you. I have to make my apology." But Elphaba leaned forward, cutting Glinda off from Clutch's line of sight, and said, "Clutch, before you go, tell us who killed Dr. Dillamond." "Surely you know that," Clutch said. "Make us sure," Elphaba said. "Well, I saw it. I mean, nearly. It had just happened and the knife was still there." Clutch worked for breath, smeared with blood that hadn't had a chance to dry. "What did you see? This is important." "I saw the knife in the air. I saw the wind come to take Dr. Dillamond away. I saw the clockwork turn and the goat's time stop." "It was Grommatic, wasn't it?" Elphaba murmured, trying to get the old woman to speak the words. "Well, that's what I'm saying, Ducky," said Clutch. "And did it see you? Did it turn on you?" cried Glinda. "Did that make you ill, Clutch?" "It was my time to be ill," said Clutch gently, "so I couldn't complain. And it is my time to die, so leave me be. Just hold my hand, dear." "But the fault is mine," began Glinda. "You would do me more good if you hushed, sweet Galinda, my duck," said Clutch gently, and patted Glinda's hand. Then she closed her eyes and breathed in and out a couple of times. They sat there in a silence that seemed peculiarly servant-class Gillikinese, though it was hard later on to explain why. Outside, Madame Morrible moved up and down the floorboards, pacing. Then they imagined they heard a wind, or an echo of a wind, and Clutch was gone, and the overly subordinate pillowcase took a small spill of human juice from the edge of her slackened mouth. Chapter 6. The funeral was modest, a love her and shove her affair. Glinda's close friends attended, filling 2 pews, and in the second tier of the chapel a flock of amahs made a professional coterie. The rest of the chapel was empty. After the corpse in its winding sheet slid along the oiled chute to the furnace, the mourners and colleagues retired to Madame Morrible's private parlor, where she proved to have sanctioned no expense in the refreshments. The tea was ancient stock, stale as sawdust. The biscuits were hard, and there was no saffron cream or tamorana marmalade. Glinda said reprovingly to the head, "Not even a small bowl of cream?" And Madame Morrible answered, "My girl, I try to protect my charges from the worst of the food shortages by judicious shopping and by going without myself, but I am not wholly responsible for your ignorance. If only people would obey the wizard absolutely, there would be abundance. Don't you realize that conditions verge on famine and cows are dying of starvation 200 miles from here? This makes saffron cream very dear in the market." Glinda began to move away, but Madame Morrible reached out a raft of cushiony, bulbous, bejeweled fingers. The touch made Glinda's blood run cold. "I should like to see you, and Miss Nessarose, and Miss Elphaba," said the head, "after the guests leave. Please wait behind." "We're nabbed for a lecture," whispered Glinda to the Throp sisters. "We have to be yelled at." "Not a word about what Clutch said, or that she came back," said Elphaba urgently. "Got that, Nessa? Nanny?" They all nodded. Bock and Averick, making their goodbyes, said that the group was reconvening at the pub in the Regent's Parade. The girls agreed to meet them there after their interview with the head. They would manage a more honest memorial service for Clutch at the Peach and Kidneys. When the small crowd had dispersed, only Grommatic clearing away the cups and crumbs, Madame Morrible herself banked up the fire, a gesture of chumminess lost on no one, and sent Grommatic away. "Later, Thingy," she said, "later. Go lubricate yourself in some closet somewhere." Grommatic wheeled away with, if it was possible, an offended air. Elphaba had to repress an urge to kick it with the tip of her stout black walking boot. "You too, Nanny?" Madame Morrible said. "A little break from your labors." "Oh, no," Nanny said. "Nanny doesn't leave her Nessa." "Yes, Nanny does. Her sister is perfectly capable of caring for her," said the head. "Aren't you, Miss Elphaba? The very soul of charity." Elphaba opened her mouth. The word soul always provoked her, Glinda knew, but closed it again. She made a wincing nod toward the door. Without a word, Nanny got up to leave, but before the door closed behind her, Nanny said, "It's not my place to complain, but really, no cream at a funeral?" "Help," said Madame Morrible when the door closed, but Glinda wasn't sure if it was a criticism of servants or a bid for sympathy. The head rallied herself by arranging her skirts and the vents and braids of her smart parlor jacket. In orangey copper sequins she looked like a huge upholstered, upended goldfish goddess. However did she get to be head, Glinda wondered. "Now that Amma Clutch has gone to ash, we shall, nay, we must move bravely on," Madame Morrible began. "My girls, may I first ask you to recount the sad story of her last words? It is essential therapy in your recovery from grief." The girls didn't look at one another. Glinda, in this situation the spokesperson, took a breath and said, "Oh, she spewed nonsense to the last." "No surprise, the dotty old thing," said Madame Morrible. "But what nonsense?" "We couldn't make it out," said Glinda. "I had wondered if she talked about the death of the goat." Glinda said, "Oh, the goat? Well, I could hardly tell. I suspected that, in her deranged condition, she might return to that critical moment. The dying often try to make sense, at the last possible moment, of the puzzles of their lives. Useless effort, of course. No doubt Amma Clutch was puzzled by what she came across, the goat's body, the blood, and Grommatic." "Oh," said Glinda faintly. The sisters beside her were careful not to stir. "That terrible morning I was up early, at my spiritual meditations, and I noticed the light in Dr. Dillamond's lab. So I sent Grommatic over with a cheering pot of tea for the old goat. Grommatic found the animal slumped over a broken lens. He'd apparently stumbled and severed his own jugular vein. Such a sad accident, born of academic zeal, not to say hubris, and a pitiful lack of common sense. Rest. We all need rest. The brightest of us need our rest." Grommatic, in its confusion, felt for a pulse. None to be found, and I surmise that it is just when Amma Clutch arrived. To see dear Grommatic splashed with the spurts of a strong circulatory pulse. Amma Clutch arrived out of nowhere, and none of her business, I might add. But let's not malign the dead, shall we? Glinda gulped back new tears, and did not mention that Amma Clutch had mentioned seeing something unusual the evening before, and had wandered out to check. "I did always think that the shock of all that blood might have been the final straw that sent Amma Clutch pitching back into her ailment. Incidentally, you see why I dismissed Grommatic just now. It's still very sensitive and suspects, I believe, that Amma Clutch thought it responsible for the goat's slaughter." Glinda said waveringly, "Madame Morrible, you should know that Amma Clutch had never suffered such a disease as I described to you. I invented it, but I didn't assign it. I didn't commit it to her, or her to it." Elphaba looked at Madame Morrible steadily, keeping her interest modest. Nessarose's eyelashes fluttered. If Madame Morrible knew Glinda's news already, her face didn't give her away. She looked as placid as a tethered rowboat. "Well, this only lends weight to my observations," she allowed. "There is an imaginative, even a prophetic power in your pointed little society skull, Miss Glinda." The head stood, her skirts rustling, wind through a field of wheat. "What I say now, I say in strictest confidence. I expect my girls to obey my command. Are we agreed?" She seemed to take their stunned silence as assent. She looked down on them. That's why she seemed so like a fish, Glinda suddenly thought. She hardly ever blinks. By an authority vested in me that is too high to be named, I have been charged with a crucial task, said the head, a task essential to the internal security of Oz. I have been working to fulfill this task for some years, and the time is right, and the goods are at my disposal. She scrutinized them. They were the goods. You will not repeat what you hear in this room, she said. You will not want to. You will not choose to, and you will not be able to. I am wrapping each of one of you in a binding cocoon as regards this very sensitive material. No, she held up a hand at Elphaba's protest. No, you have no right to object. The deed is already done, and you must listen and be open to what I say. Glinda tried to examine herself to see if she felt wrapped or bound or spell-chilled, but she only felt frightened and young, which may be close to the same thing. She glanced at the sisters. Nesselrose, in her dazzling shoes, was back in her chair, nostrils dilating in fright or excitement. Elphaba, on the other hand, looked as stolid and cross as usual. You live in a little womb here, a tight little nest, girl with girl. Oh, I know you have your silly boys on the edge, forgettable things, good for one thing and only, and not even reliable at that. But I digress. I must say that you know little or nothing of the state of the nation today. You have no sense of the pitch of unrest to which things have mounted, setting communities on edge, ethnic groups against one another, bankers against farmers, and factories against shopkeepers. Oz is a seething volcano threatening to erupt and burn us in its own poisonous pus. Our wizard seems strong enough. Ah, but is he? Is he really? He has a grasp of internal politics. He's no slouch at negotiating rates of exchange with the bloodsuckers of Ev, or Gemiko, or Fleon. He rules the Emerald City with an industry and an ability that the decaying, knob-jawed Ozma line never dreamed of. Without him, we'd have been swept away in firestorm years ago. But we can but be grateful. A strong fist does wonders in a rotten situation. Walk softly, but carry a big stick. I see I offend. Well, a man is always good for the public face of power, no? Yes, but things are not always as they seem, and it has been clear for some time that the wizard's bag of tricks would not do forever. There are bound to be popular uprisings, the stupid, senseless kind in which strong, dumb people enjoy getting killed for the sake of political changes that'll be rolled back within the decade. Add such meaning to meaningless lives, don't you think? One can't imagine any other reason for it. At any rate, the wizard needs some agents. He requires a few generals. In the long run, some people with managing skills, some people with gumption. In a word, women. I have called you three girls in here. You are not women yet, but the moment is closing in on you faster than you might think. Despite my opinion as to your behavior, I have had to single you out. There is more in each one of you than meets the eye. Miss Nesselrose, being the newest, you are the most hidden to me. But once you outgrow that fetching habit of faith, you will display a ferocious authority. Your bodily disorder is of no significance here. Miss Elphaba, you are an isolate, and even in my binding spell you sit there stewing in scorn of every word I say. This is evidence of great internal power and force of will, something I deeply respect, even when marshaled against me. You have shown no sign of interest in sorcery, and I don't claim you have any natural aptitude. But your splendid lone wolf spit and spirit can be harnessed. Oh, yes, it can. And you needn't live a life of unfulfilled rage. And Miss Glinda, you have surprised yourself with the talents at sorcery you possess. I knew you would. I had hoped your inclinations might rub off on Miss Elphaba. But that they haven't is only firmer proof of Miss Elphaba's iron character. I see in your eyes you all question my methods. You think, somewhat wildly. "Did horrible Morrible cause that nail to pierce my Amma Clutch's foot, making me have to room with Elphaba? Did she cause Amma Clutch to come downstairs and find the dead goat, the better to get her out of the way and require Nanny, and thus Nessa Rose to show up on scene? How flattering that you even imagine I have such power." The head paused and came near to blushing, which in her was something like the separating of cream on a flame set too high. "I am a handmaiden at the service of superiors," she continued, "and my special talent is to encourage talent. In my own small way I have been called to a vocation of education, and here I make my little contributions to history. Now, to be specific, I want you to consider your futures. I would like to name you, to baptize you, as it were, as a trio of adepts. In the long run, I would like to assign you behind-the-scenes ministerial duties in different parts of the country. I am empowered to do this, remember, by those whose bootstraps I am not worthy to lick." But she looked smug, as if she thought of herself quite worthy enough, indeed, of attention from these mysterious forces. "Let us say you will be secret partners of the highest level of government. You will be anonymous ambassadors of peace, helping to restrain the unruly element among our less civilized populations. Nothing is decided yet, of course, and you do have a say in the matter. A say to me, and not to each other nor anyone else, as the spell goes, but I would like you to think about it. I need, eventually, to place an adept in Gillikin somewhere. Miss Glinda, with your middle-range social position and your transparent ambitions, you can slime your way into ballrooms of Margreaves and still be at home in the pigsties. Oh, don't squirm so. Your good blood is only on one side, and it's not a terribly refined strain anyway. The adept of Gillikin, Miss Glinda. Does it appeal?" Glinda could only listen. "Miss Elphaba," said Madame Morrible, full of the teenage scorn of inherited position, "you are none the less the Throp third descending, and your great-grandfather, the eminent Throp, is in his dotage. One day you will inherit what is left of Colwyn grounds, that pretentious pile in Nest Hardings, and you could manage to be the adept of Munchkinland. Your unfortunate skin condition notwithstanding, indeed perhaps because of it, you have developed a feistiness and an iconoclasm that is just faintly appealing when it doesn't nauseate. It will come in service, believe me. And Miss Nessa Rose," she went on, "having grown up in Quadling Country, you will want to return there with Nanny. The social situation in Quadling Country is such a mess, what with the decimation of the squelchy froglet population, but it may come back, in small measure, and there should be someone to oversee the ruby mines. We need someone to look after things in the South. Once you recover from your religious mania, it'll be a perfect setting. You don't expect a life of high society anyway, not without arms. After all, how can one dance without arms? As for the Vinkus, we don't imagine we'll need an adept stationed there, at least not in your lifetimes. The master plans eradicate any appreciable population in that god-forsaken place." Here the head paused and looked around. "Oh, girls, I know you are young. I know this grieves you. You mustn't think of it as a prison sentence, though, but an opportunity. You ask yourselves, how will I grow in a position, albeit a silent one, of prominence and responsibility? How may my talents flourish? How, my dears, how may I help my Oz?" Elphaba's foot twisted, caught on the edge of a side table, and a cup and saucer fell to the floor and smashed. "You're so predictable," said Madame Morrible, sighing. "That's what makes my job so easy. Now, girls, bound as you are to an oath of silence, I bid you to go away and think on what I've said. Please don't even try to discuss it together, as it'll just give you a headache and cramps. You won't be able to manage it. Sometime in the next semester I will call each of you in here, and you can give me your answer. And if you should choose not to help your country in its hour of need—" She clasped her hands in a parody of despair. Well, you're not the only fish in the sea, are you? The afternoon had turned glowery, with heaps of plum-colored clouds in the north, beyond the blue stone spires and steeples. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees since the morning, and the girls kept their shawls pulled close as they walked to the pub. Nanny, shivering in the dirty wind, cried, "And what did the old busybody have to say that I couldn't be allowed to hear?" But there was nothing they could say. Glinda couldn't even meet the other's eyes. "We'll lift a glass of champagne for Alma Clutch," said Elphaba finally, "when we get to the peach and kidneys." "I'd settle for a spoonful of real cream," said Nanny. "How pinching that old sow is! No respect for the dead." But Glinda found that the binding spell was deeper, cut closer than she had even understood. It wasn't merely that they couldn't talk about it. Already she had begun to lose the words about it, to falter in her thinking, to fail to commit the interview to memory. There was the proposal. It was a proposal, wasn't it? Of some questionable proposition in, was it the civil service? Doing some ballroom dancing, which didn't make sense. Some laughing, a glass of champagne, a handsome man taking off his cummerbund and pressing his starched cuffs against her neck, nibbling the teardrop-shaped rubies at her ears. Talk softly, but carry a big stick. Or was it not a proposal, but a prophecy? A little friendly encouragement about the future? And she had been alone. The others hadn't been listening. Madame Morrible had spoken directly to her. A lovely testimony to Glinda's potential, the chance to rise. Walk softly, but marry a big prick. A man draping his evening tie on a bedstead and rolling his diamond studs, nudging them with his nose down the declivity of her superior neck. It was a dream. Madame Morrible couldn't have said that. She must be dazed with grief. Poor Alma Clutch. It had only been a quiet word of condolence from the dear and self-effacing head, who found it hard to speak in public, but a man's tongue between her legs. A spoonful of saffron cream. Nessa Rose said, "Catch her. I can't. I'm—" And she sagged against Nanny's bosom, and Glinda swooned at the same moment. Elphaba thrust out strong arms and scooped Glinda in mid-collapse. Glinda didn't really lose consciousness, but the uncomfortable physical nearness of hawk-faced Elphaba after that undesired act of desire made her want to shiver with revulsion, and to purr at the same time. "Steady on, girl. Not here," said Elphaba. "Resist. Come on." Resist was just what Glinda didn't want to do. But after all, in the shadow of an apple cart, on the edge of the market where merchants were selling the last fish of the day, cheap, well, this was hardly the place. "Tough, tough skin," said Elphaba, appearing to pull words from the back of her throat. "Come on, Glinda. You've got better brains. Come on. I love you too much. Snap out of it, you idiot." "Well, really," she said, as Elphaba dumped her on a heap of moldy packing straw. "No need to be so romantic about it." But she felt better as a wave of illness had just passed. "You girls, I tell you, the faints, it comes from those tight shoes," said Nanny, huffing and loosening Nessa Rose's glamorous footwear. "Sensible folk wear leather or wood." She massaged Nessa Rose's insteps for a minute, and Nessa Rose moaned and arched her back, but began in a few moments to breathe more normally. "Welcome back to Oz," said Nanny after a while. "What goodies were you all snacking on, in there with the head?" "Come on, they're waiting," said Elphaba. "No sense dawdling. Anyway, I'm afraid it might rain." At the Peach and Kidneys, the rest of the gang had commandeered a table in an alcove several steps above the main floor. They were well into their cups by that point in the afternoon, and it was clear tears had been shed. Averick sat slouched against the brick wall of the student den, one arm slung around Fiyero and his legs stretched out in Shen Shen's lap. Bock and Croak were arguing about something, anything, and Tibbet was singing an interminable song to Fanny, who looked as if she wanted to drive a dart into the thick of his thigh. "Ah, the ladies," slurred Avaric, and made as if to rise. They sang, they chattered, and ordered sandwiches, and Avaric plunked down an embarrassment of coins to demand a salver of saffron cream in Amma Clutch's memory. Money did wonders, and the cream was found in the larder, which gave Glinda an uneasy feeling, though she didn't know why. They spooned the airy mounds into one another's mouths, sculpted with it, mixed it with their champagne, threw it in small gobbets at one another until the manager came over and told them to get the hell out. They complied, grumbling. They didn't know it was the last time they would all be together. Or they might have lingered. A brisk rain had come and gone, but the streets were still noisy with runoff, and the lamplight glistened and danced in the silvery black curvets of water caught among the cobbles. Imagining the possible brigand in the shadows, or the hungry wanderer lurking nearby, they stood close together. "I've got an idea," said Avaric, putting one foot this way and the other that, as if he were as flexible as a man made of straw. "Who's man enough for the Philosophy Club tonight?" "Oh, no you don't," said Nanny, who hadn't had that much to drink. "I want to go," whined Nesselrose, swaying more than usual. "You don't even know what it is," said Bock, giggling and hiccuping. "I don't care. I don't want to leave tonight," Nesselrose said. "We only have one another, and I don't want to be left out, and I don't want to go home." "Hush, Nessa, hush, hush, my pretty," said Elphaba. "That's not the place for you, or me either. Come on, we're going home. Glinda, come on." "I have no Amma now," said wide-eyed Glinda, stabbing a finger toward Elphaba. "I am my own agent. I want to go to the Philosophy Club and see if it's true." "The rest can do what they want, but we're going home," said Elphaba. Glinda veered over toward Elphaba, who was homing in on a very uncertain-looking Bock. "Now, Bock, you don't want to go to that disgusting place, do you?" Elphaba was saying. "Come on, don't let the boys make you do something you don't want." "You don't know me," he said, appearing to address the hitching post. "Elfie, how do you know what I want? Unless I find out. "Come with us," said Fiyero to Elphaba. "Please, if we ask you politely." "I want to go too," whined Glinda. "Oh, come, Glinny Dinny," said Bog. "Maybe they'll pick us, for old time's sake, as never was." The others had awakened a slumbering cab driver and hired his services. "Bock, Glinda, Elfie, come on," Avaric called from the window. "Where's your nerve?" "Bock, think about this," Elphaba urged. "I always think. I never feel. I never live," he moaned. "Can't I live once in a while, just once? Just because I'm short, I'm not an infant, Elfie." "Not till now," said Elphaba. Rather smarmy tonight, thought Glinda, and wrenched herself away to climb into the cab. But Elphaba grabbed her by the elbow and pivoted her around. "You can't," she whispered. "We're going to the Emerald City." "I'm going to the Philosophy Club with my friends tonight," hissed Elphaba. "You little idiot. We have no time to waste on sex." Nanny had led Nesselrose away already, and the cabby clucked his reins, and the equipage lumbered away. Glinda stumbled and said, "What did you think you were just about to say? To say?" "I already said it, and I'm not saying it again," said Elphaba. "My dear, you and I are going back to Craige Hall tonight only to pack a valise. Then we're away." "But the gates'll be locked." "It's over the garden wall," said Elphaba, "and we're going to see the wizard. Come what may, and hell to pay." Chapter 7. Bock could not believe he was heading to the Philosophy Club at last. He hoped he wouldn't vomit at a crucial moment, He hoped he would remember the whole thing tomorrow, or at least some kernel of it, despite the headache forming vengefully in the hollows at his temples. The place was discreet, though it was the best-known dive in Shiz. It hid behind a facade of paneled-up windows. A couple of apes roamed the street in front, bouncing troublemakers ahead of time. Averick counted the party carefully as they fell from the cab. Shen, Crope, me, Bach, Tibbet, Friero, and Fanny. 7. Boy, how we'd all fit in the cab could hardly fit us, I'd think. He paid the cabby and tipped him, in some obscure homage still to Alma Clutch, and then pushed to the front of the silent knot of companions. Come on, we're the right age and the right drunk, he said, and to the shadowed face at the window, 7 of us, good sir. The face came forward to the glass and leered at him. The name is Yackle. I'm not a sir, nor am I good. What kind are you up to tonight, master fellow? Speaking through the pane was a crone, with random teeth and a shiny white-pink wig slipping westwards off her pearly scalp. Kind? Said Averick, then more bravely. Any kind. I mean the tickets, sweetbread, strutting and strumming on the sprung floor, or strumpeting in the old wine cellars. The works, said Averick. You understand house rules, the locked doors, the if you pay, you play policy? Give us 7 and hurry up about it. We're not fools. You never are fools, said the beastly woman. Well, here you are then, and come what may, or who may. She affected a stance of virtue, like a painting of a Unionist virgin saint. Ever, and enter and be saved. The door swung open, and they went down a flight of uneven brick steps. At the bottom of the flight was a dwarf in a purple burnous. He looked at their tickets and said, Where are you soft things from? Out of town? We're all at the university, said Averick. A motley crew. Well, you've 7 of diamond tickets. See here, the 7 red diamonds printed here and here, he said. Have a drink on the house. Watch the girly show, and dance a little if you want. Every hour or so I close this street door and open the next. He pointed to a huge oak door, barred with 2 monstrous timbers in iron hasps. You all go in together, or you don't go in at all. That's the rule of the house. There was a chanteuse singing a send-up of What is Oz without Ozma, and teasing himself with a parrot-colored feather boa. A small band of elves, real elves, tootled and rattled out a tinny accompaniment. Bach had never seen an elf, even though he knew there was a colony of them not far from Rush Margins. How weird, he said, inching forward. They looked like hairless monkeys, naked but for little red caps and without any appreciable sex characteristics. They were as green as sin. Bach turned to say, Look, Elfie, it's like you had a passel of babies. But he didn't see her, and remembered then that she hadn't come. Nor had Glinda, apparently. Damn. They danced. The crowd was the most mixed Bach had seen in some time. There were animals, humans, dwarves, elves, and several tick-tock things of incomplete or experimental gender. A squadron of well-built blonde boys circulated with tumblers of rot-gut squash wine, which the friends drank, because it was free. I don't know if I want to go any more daring than this, said Fanny to Bach at one point. I mean, look, that hussy of a baboon is almost out of her dress. Perhaps we should call it a night. Do you think? Said Bach. I mean, I'm game, but if you're feeling uneasy... Oh, hurrah, a way out. He was feeling uneasy himself. Well, let's get Averick. He's over there nosing up to Shen. But before they could make their way across the crowded dance floor, the elves began to let out a banshee screech, and the singer thrust out her hip and said, That's the mating call, dollies, ladies and gentle friends. We're doing, and I mean doing, she glanced at a note in her hand. 5 black clubs, 3 black clubs, 6 red hearts, 7 red diamonds, and On their honeymoon, isn't it sweet? She simulated gagging. 2 black spades. Up to the mouth of everlasting bliss, fraidies and gentle hens. Avaric, no, said Bock. But the crone from the front, who called herself Yackle, came knocking through the hall, having apparently locked up the front door for the time being, and she remembered the holders of the designated cards and brought them forward with a smile. All rides, all riders, on the ready, she said. Here we be, at the shank end of the evening. Lighten up, lads, it's not a funeral, it's an entertainment. It had been a funeral, Bock remembered, trying to invoke the warm, self-effacing spirit of Amma Clutch. But the time to back out, if such a time existed, had passed. They were swept through the oak doors and along a slightly sloping passage whose walls were padded in red and blue velvet. A merry tune was playing farther on, a dancing, ragged melody. A smell of roasting tin leaves, sweet and softening. You could almost feel them turning up their purplish edges. Yackle led the way, and the 23 revelers processed, in a confused state of apprehension, elation, and randiness. The dwarf followed behind. Bock took stock, as best his stumbling mind could manage. An erect tiger in hip boots and a cape, a couple of bankers and their evening consorts, all wearing black masks, as a protection against blackmail or as an aphrodisiac, a party of merchants from Ev and Fleon, in town on business, a couple of women rather long in the tooth, bedecked in costume jewelry. The honeymoon couple were Glickens. Bock hoped that his crowd wasn't gawping as much as the Glickens were. As he glanced around, only Avaric and Shen looked eager, and Fiyero, possibly because he hadn't yet grasped what this was all about. The others looked more than a little squeamish. They entered a small, dark theater in the round, with the space for the public divided into 6 stalls. Above, the ceiling was lost in a stony blackness. Tapers fluttered, and a hollow music issued through fissures in the wall, increasing an unearthly air of dislocation and otherness. The stalls circled and faced the central stage, which was enshrouded in black drapes. The stalls were separated from one another by vertical strips of latticed wood and slats of mirror. All the parties were being mixed up, all friends and partners separated. Was there incense in the air, too? It seemed to make Bock's mind split in half, like a husk, and allow a tenderer, complacent mind to emerge. The softer, more bruisable aspect, the private intention, the surrendering self. He felt he was knowing less and less, and it was more and more beautiful to do so. Why had he been alarmed? He was sitting on a stool, and around him in the stall sat, almost preternaturally near, a man in a black mask. An asp he hadn't noticed before, the tiger, whose breath ran hot and meaty on his neck, a beautiful schoolgirl, or was that the bride on her honeymoon? Did the whole stall then tilt forward, like a gently swung bucket? Anyway, they leaned together toward the central dais, an altar of veils and sacrifices. Bock loosened his collar and then his belt, felt the gingery appetite between heart and stomach and the resulting stiffening apparatus below that. The music of pipes and whistles was slowing. Or was it that, as he watched and waited and breathed so slowly, that the secret area inside himself uncloaked itself, where nothing mattered? The dwarf, in a darker hood now, appeared on the stage. He could see from his vantage point into all the stalls, but the revelers in separate stalls couldn't see one another. The dwarf leaned and reached a hand here, there, welcoming, beckoning. He encouraged from one stall the figure of a woman, from another a man. Was it Tibbet? And from the stall where Bock sat he gestured to the tiger. Bock felt only faintly sorry not to be chosen himself as he watched the dwarf pass a smoking vial beneath the nostrils of the 3 acolytes, and to help them remove their clothes. There were shackles, and a tray of scented oils and emollients, and a chest whose contents were still in shadow. The dwarf bound black blindfolds around the heads of the scholars. The tiger was pacing on all fours and growling softly, tossing his head back and forth in distress or excitement. Tibbet, for it was he, though nearly out of consciousness, was made to lie on his back on the floor of the stage. The tiger strode over him and stood still, while the dwarf and his assistants lifted Tibbet and tied his wrists together around the tiger's chest and his ankles around the tiger's pelvis. So Tibbet hung beneath the tiger's belly, like a trussed pig, his face lost in the tiger's chest hair. The woman was set on a sloping stool, almost like a huge tilting bowl, and the dwarf tucked something aromatic and runny up in the shadowy regions. Then the dwarf pointed to Tibbet, who was beginning to twist and moan into the tiger's chest. "Let X be the unknown god," said the dwarf, poking Tibbet in the ribs. The dwarf then slapped the tiger on his flank with a riding crop, and the tiger strained forward, positioning his head between the woman's legs. "Let Y be the dragon of time in its cave," said the dwarf, hitting the tiger again. As he laced the woman into the half shell, stroking her nipples with a glowing salve, he handed her a riding crop with which she could lash at the tiger's flanks and face. "And let Z be the Cumbric witch, and let us see if she exists tonight." The crowd drew nearer, almost participants themselves, and the musky sense of adventure made them tear at their own buttons and nibble their own lips, leaning in. "Such are the variables in our equation," said the dwarf as the room darkened even further. "So now let the true clandestine study of knowledge begin." Okay. Final chapter for the night. Chapter 8. The industrialists of Shiz, from an early stage wary of the growing power of the wizard, had elected not to lay down the rail line from Shiz to the Emerald City as originally planned. Therefore, it was a good 3 days' journey from Shiz to the Emerald City, and this was in the best of weather, for the wealthy who could pay for a constant change of horses. For Glinda and Elphaba it took more than a week, a bleak, cold-scoured week, as the winds of autumn ripped the leaves off trees with a dry screech and a rattle of brittle, protesting limbs. They rested, like other third-class travelers, in the back rooms above inn kitchens. In a single lumpy bed they huddled together for warmth and encouragement and, Glinda told herself, protection. The ostlers cooed and shrieked in the stable yard below. The kitchen maids came and went noisily at odd hours. Glinda would start as if from a frightful dream, and nestle in nearer to Elphaba, who seemed at night never to sleep. Daytimes, the long hours spent in poorly sprung carriages, Elphaba would nod off against Glinda's shoulder. The land outside grew less succulent and varied. The trees were crabbed, as if conserving their strength. And then the sandy scrubland was domesticated by farm life. Overgrazed fields were dotted with cows, their withers shriveled and papery, their lowing desperate. An emptiness settled in the farmyards. Once Glinda saw a farm woman standing on her doorstep, hands sunk deep in apron pockets, face lined with grief and rage at the useless sky. The woman watched the carriage pass, and her face showed a yearning to be on it, to be dead, to be anywhere else other than on this carcass of a property. The farms gave way to deserted mills and abandoned granges. Then, abrupt and decisive, the Emerald City rose before them. A city of insistence, of blanket declaration. It made no sense, clodding up the horizon, sprouting like a mirage on the characterless plains of central Oz. Glinda hated it from the moment she saw it. Brash upstart of a city. She supposed it was her Gillikinese superiority asserting itself. She was glad of it. The carriage passed through one of the northern gates, and the scramble of life aroused itself again, but in an urban key, less restrained and self-forgiving than that of Shiz. The Emerald City was not amused by itself, nor did it consider amusement a proper attitude for a city. Its high self-regard sprang up in public spaces, ceremonial squares, parks, and facades and reflecting pools. How juvenile! How devoid of irony, murmured Glinda. The pomp! The pretension! But Elphaba, who had passed through the Emerald City only once before, on her way up to Shiz, had no interest in architecture. She had her eyes glued on the people. No animals, she said. Not so you can see, anyway. Maybe they've all gone underground. Underground? Said Glinda, thinking of legendary menaces like the Gnome King and his subterranean colony, or dwarves in their mines in Glickus, or the Time Dragon of the old myths, dreaming the world of Oz from his airless tomb. In hiding, said Elphaba. Look, the poor. I mean, are they the poor? The hungry of Oz? From the failed farms? Or is it just the surplus? The expendable human selvage? Look at them, Glinda. This is a real question. The Quadlings, having nothing, looked more than these. Off the boulevard on which they rode branched alleys, where shelves of tin and cardboard served as roofs for the flood of indigents. Many of them were children, though some were diminutive Munchkinlanders, and some were dwarves, and some were Gillikinese bowed with hunger and strain. The carriage moved slowly, and faces stood out. A Glickin youth with no teeth and no feet or calves, on his stumpy knees in a box, begging. A Quadling. Look, a Quadling, said Elphaba, grabbing Glinda's wrist. Glinda caught a glimpse of a ruddy brown woman in a shawl, lifting a small apple to the child in a sling around her neck. 3 Gillikinese girls dressed like women for hire, more children in a pack, running and squealing like piglets, pressing up against a merchant to pick his pockets, rag merchants with push carts, kiosk keepers whose goods lay locked beneath safety grills, and a sort of civil army, if you could call it that, strolling in foursomes on every second or third street, brandishing clubs, angular with swords. They paid the carriage master and walked with their parcels of clothes toward the palace. It rose, in stepped-back fashion, a growth of domes and minarets, high-flared buttresses in green marble, blue agate screens in the recessed windows. Central and most prominent, the broad, gentle-browed canopies of the pagoda lifted over the throne room, covered with hammered scales of virgin gold, brilliant in the late afternoon gloom. Rather grand in a grimy sort of way. Five days later, they had made it past the gatekeeper, the receptionists, and the social secretary. They had sat for hours awaiting a 3-minute interview with the Commander General of Audiences. Elphaba, a hard, twisted look on her face, had managed to eject the words Madame Morrible from between her clamping lips. Tomorrow at 11, said the Commander General. You will have 4 minutes between the ambassador to Ix and the matron of the Ladies' Home Guard Social Nourishment Brigade. Dress code is formal. He handed them a card of regulations that, being unequipped with courtly dress, they were obliged to ignore. At 3 the following afternoon, everything running late, the ambassador to Ix left the throne room looking agitated and splenetic. Glinda fluffed the bedraggled feathers in her traveling hat for the 80th time and sighed. Now, you're the one who says what should be said. Elphaba nodded. To Glinda she looked tired, terrified, but strong, as if her form were knit with iron and whiskey instead of bones and blood. The Commander General of Audiences appeared in the doorway of the waiting salon. You have 4 minutes, he said. Do not approach until you are bade to do so. Do not speak until you are addressed. Do not venture a remark unless it is to answer a comment or question. You may refer to the wizard as Your Highness. That sounds pretty regal to me. I thought that royalty had been... But here Glinda elbowed Elphaba to make her shut up. Really, Elphaba had no common sense sometimes. They hadn't come so far just to be turned away because of adolescent radicalism. The Commander General took no notice. As they approached a set of tall double doors, carved with sigils and other occult hieroglyphs, the Commander General mentioned, "The wizard is not in a good humor today due to the reports of a riot in the Ugabu district in the north of Winky Country. I should be prepared for what I find, were I you." Two stoical doormen opened the doors for them, and they passed through. But the throne did not lie before them. Instead, the antechamber had left, and through an archway there was another, but on a shifting axis to the right, and another beyond that, and another. It was like looking through a reflection of a corridor in mirrors set opposite each other. It veered inward. Or, thought Glinda, like processing through the narrowing, deviating chambers of a nautilus. They made a circuit through 8 or 10 salons, each slightly smaller than the other, each steeped in a curdled light that fell from leaded panes above. At last the antechambers concluded at an archway into a cavernous circular hall, higher than it was wide, and dark as a chapel. Antique wrought iron stands held ziggurats of molded beeswax burning with multitudes of wicks, and the air was close and slightly flowery. The wizard was absent, though they saw the throne on a circular dais, inset emeralds gleaming dully in the candlelight. "He stepped out to use the toilet," said Elphaba. "Well, we'll wait." They stood at the archway, not daring to venture farther without invitation. "If we only have 4 minutes, I hope this doesn't count," said Glinda. "I mean, it took us 2 minutes just to get from there to here." "At this point," said Elphaba, and then, "Shh." Glinda shhed. She didn't think she heard anything. Then she wasn't sure. There was no change that she could identify in the gloom, but Elphaba looked like a pointer, on alert. Her chin was out, her nose high and nostrils flared, her dark eyes squinting and widening. "What?" said Glinda. "What?" The sound of... Glinda heard no sounds, unless it was the hot air lifting from the flames into the chilly shadows between dark rafters. Or was it the rustle of silk robes? Was the wizard approaching? She looked this way and that. No, there was a rustle, a sort of hiss, as of bacon rashers in a skillet. The candle flames suddenly all genuflected, obedient to a sour wind that beat from the area of the throne. Then the dais was pelted with thick drops of rain, and a shudder of homegrown thunder blatted out, more dropped kitchen kettles than timpani. On the throne was a skeleton of dancing lights. At first Glinda thought lightning, but then she realized it was luminescent bones hitched together to suggest something vaguely human, or at least mammalian. The rib cage flexed open like 2 fretted hands, and a voice spoke in the storm, not from the skull, but from the dark eye of the storm, where the heart of the lightning creature should be, in the tabernacle of the rib cage. "I am Oz, the great and terrible," it said, and shook the room with its related weather. "Who are you?" Glinda glanced at Elphaba. "Go on, Elfie," she said, nudging her. But Elphaba looked terrified. Well, of course, the rain. She had that thing about rainstorms. "Who are you?" bellowed the thing. The Wizard of Oz. Whatever. "Elfie!" hissed Glinda. Then, "Oh, you useless thing. I'll talk and know. I'm Glinda, from Frodica, if you please, your highness, descended matrilineally from the Arduenus of the upland. And this, if you please, is Elphaba, the Throp third descending from Nest Hardings, if you please." "And if I don't please?" said the wizard. "Oh, really, how like a child," said Glinda under her breath. "Elfie, come on, I can't say why we're here." But the banal comment of the wizards seemed to snap Elphaba out of her terror. Staying where she was at the edge of the room, gripping Glinda's hand for support, Elphaba said, "We're students of Madame Morrible at Crage Hall in Shiz, your highness, and we're in possession of some vital information." "We are?" said Glinda. "Thanks for telling me." The small rain seemed to let up a bit, though the room stayed dark as an ellipse. "Madame Morrible, That paragon of paradoxes, said the wizard. Vital information of her, I wonder? No, said Elphaba. That is, it is not for us to interpret what we hear. Gossip is unreliable, but gossip is instructive, said the wizard. It tells which way the wind is blowing. The wind then blew in the direction of the girls, and Elphaba danced back to avoid being spattered. Go ahead, girls, gossip. No, said Elphaba. We're here on more important business. Elfie, said Glinda, do you want to get us thrown in prison? Who are you to decide what is important business? Roared the wizard. I keep my eyes open, said Elphaba. You didn't call us here to ask for our gossip. We came with our own agenda. How do you know I didn't call you here? Well, they didn't know, especially after whatever it was had happened to them at tea with Madame Morrible. Scale down, Elfie, whispered Glinda. You're making him mad. So what? Elphaba said. I'm mad. She spoke up again. I have news of the murder of a great scientist and a great thinker, Your Highness. I have news of important discoveries that he was making, and their suppression. I have every interest in the pursuit of justice, and I know you do too, so that the amazing revelations of Dr. Dillamond will help you to reverse your recent judgments on the rights of animals. Dr. Dillamond, said the wizard. Is that all this is about? It's about an entire population of animals systematically deprived of their... I know of Dr. Dillamond, and I know of his work, said the glowing bones of the wizard, snorting. Derivative, unauthenticated, specious garbage. What do you expect of an academic animal, predicated on shaky political notions? Empiricism, quackery, tomfoolery, cant, rant, and rhetoric. Were you taken in, perhaps, by his enthusiasm, his animal passion? The skeleton danced a jig, or perhaps it was a twitch of disgust. I know of his interests and his findings. I know little of what you call his murder, and I care less. I am not a slave to emotions, Elphaba said sternly. She was pulling papers from her sleeve, where she had apparently rolled them up around her arm. This is not propaganda, Your Highness. This is a well-argued theory of consciousness inclination. It's what he calls it, and you will be amazed to learn of his discoveries. No right-thinking ruler can afford to ignore the That you presume me to be right-thinking is touching, said the wizard. You may drop the things where you stand, unless you prefer to approach. The lightning marionette grinned and stretched out its arms. My pet? Elphaba dropped the papers. Good my lord, she said in a piercing, pretentious voice, I shall take you to be right-thinking, for did I not, I should be obliged to join an army against you. Oh, hell, Elfie, said Glinda, then more loudly. She doesn't speak for the both of us, Your Highness. I'm an independent person here. Please, said Elphaba, at once hard and soft, proud and pleading. Glinda realized she had never before witnessed Elphaba wanting anything. Please, sir, the hardship on the animals is more than can be borne. It isn't just the murder of Dr. Dillamond. It's this forced repatriation, this chattelizing of free beasts. You must get out and see the sorrow. There is worry that the next step will be slaughter and cannibalism. This isn't merely youthful outrage. Please, sir, this is not untrammeled emotion. What's happening is immoral. I do not listen when anyone uses the word immoral, said the wizard. In the young, it is ridiculous. In the old, it is sententious and reactionary, and an early warning sign of apoplexy. In the middle-aged, who love and fear the idea of moral life the most, it is hypocritical. If not immoral, then what word can I use to imply wrong, said Elphaba. Try mysterious, and then relax a little. The thing is, my green girlie, it is not for a girl, or a student, or a citizen to assess what is wrong. This is the job of leaders, and why we exist. But then nothing would keep me from assassinating you. Did I not know what wrong was? I don't believe in assassination. I don't even know what it means, Glinda called. Yoo-hoo! I'm going to take my leave now while I'm still alive. Wait, said the wizard. I have something to ask you. They stood still. They stood for minutes. The skeleton fingered its ribs, played them like the brittle strings of a harp, music like stones turning over in a stream bed. The skeleton collected its lighted teeth from its jaws and juggled them. Then it tossed them at the seat of the throne, where they exploded in candy-colored flashes. The rain was running down a drain in the floor, Glinda noticed. Madame Morrible, said the wizard, agent, provocateur, and gossip, crony and companion, teacher and minister. Tell me why she sent you here. She didn't, said Elphaba. Do you even know the meaning of the word pawn? Shrieked the wizard. Do you know what resistance means? Elphaba shot back. But the wizard only laughed instead of killing them on the spot. What does she want of you? Glinda spoke up. It was about time. A decent education. For all her bombastic ways, she's a capable administrator. It can't be easy. Elphaba was staring at her with a queer, slanted look. Has she brought you in? Glinda didn't quite understand. We're only sophisters. We only begun to specialize. I in sorcery, Elphaba in life sciences. I see. The wizard seemed to consider. And after you graduate next year? I suppose I'll go back to Frodica and get married. And you? Elphaba didn't answer. The wizard itself turned itself around, broke off its femurs, and pounded the seat of the throne as if it were a kettle drum. Really, this is getting ridiculous. It's all pleasure-faced showbiz, said Elphaba. She took a step or two forward. Excuse me, your highness, before our time is up. The wizard turned back. Its skull was on fire, a fire not quenched by the thickening curtain of rain. I shall say one last thing, the wizard ventured, in a voice like a groan, a voice of one in pain. I shall quote from the Oziad, the hero tale of ancient Oz. The girls waited. The Wizard of Oz recited. Then, hobbling like a glacier, old Combricia rubs the naked sky till it rains with blood. She tears the skin off the sun and eats it hot. She tucks the sickle moon in her patient purse. She bears it out, a full-grown changeling stone. Shard by shard she rearranges the world. It looks the same, she says, but it is not. It looks as they expect, but it is not. Beware whom you serve, said the Wizard of Oz. Then he was gone, and the gutters in the floor gurgled, and the candles instantly went out. There was nothing for them to do but retrace their steps. It was a bizarre encounter. At the carriage, Glinda had settled in and made a little nest for them in the desirable forward-facing seat, guarding Elphaba's place against 3 other passengers. My sister, she lied. I'm saving the seat for my sister. And how I have changed, she thought, in a year and some. From despising the colored girl to claiming we are blood. So university life does change you in ways you cannot guess. I may be the only person in all the Pertha Hills ever to meet our wizard. Not on my own steam, not of my initiative. Still, I was there. I did it. And we're not dead. But we didn't accomplish much. Then, There was Elfie at last, barreling along the paving stones with her elbows jutting and her thin, bony torso swathed against the elements, as usual, in a cape. She came up through the crowd, batting at more refined passengers to get past, and Glinda shoved open the door. "Thank heavens! I thought you'd be late," she said. "The driver's eager to leave. Did you get a lunch for us?" Elphaba tossed in her lap a couple of oranges, a hunk of unrepentant cheese, and a loaf of bread that filled the compartment with pungent staleness. "This'll have to do till your stop this evening," she said. "Me? Me?" said Glinda. "What do you mean, me? Have you got something better to eat for yourself?" "Something worse, I expect," said Elphaba, "but needs to be done. I've come to say goodbye. I'm not going back with you to Craige Hall. I'll find a place to study on my own. I'll not be part of Madame Morrible's school again." "No, no," cried Glinda. "I can't let you. Nanny will eat me alive. Nessa Rose will die. Madame Morrible will—" "Elfie, no, no." "Tell them I kidnapped you and made you come here. They'll believe that of me," said Elphaba. She stood on the mounting tread. A fat, glicken female dwarf, having caught the gist of the drama, shifted to the more comfortable seat next to Glinda. "They needn't look for me, Glinda, for I'm not going to be findable. I'm going down." "Down where? Back to Quadling Country?" "That would be telling," Elphaba said. "But I won't lie to you, my dear. No need to lie. I don't know yet where I'm going. I haven't decided, so I wouldn't have to lie." "Elfie, get in this cab. Don't be a fool," Glinda cried. The driver was adjusting the reins and yelling at Elphaba to sod off. "You'll be all right," Elphaba said. Now you're a seasoned traveler. This is just the return leg of a voyage you already know." She put her face against Glinda's and kissed her. "Hold out, if you can," she murmured, and kissed her again. "Hold out, my sweet." The driver clucked the reins and pitched a cry to leave. Glinda craned her head to see Elphaba drift back into the crowds. For all her singularity of complexion, it was astounding how quickly she became camouflaged in the ragamuffin variety of street life in the Emerald City. Or maybe it was foolish tears blurring Glinda's vision. Elphaba hadn't cried, of course. Her head had turned away quickly as she stepped down, not to hide her tears, but to soften the fact of their absence. But the sting to Glinda was real. All right, my babies. That concludes another read for the evening. Thank you so much for being with me and letting me read for you today. I hope you enjoyed that. That was a ride. That was a roller coaster ride, to be sure. I'm sure it's just going to get even wilder as the story continues. So, if you happen to like this reading, if you like my previous readings, if you like the content on my channel, please click like and subscribe. I'm always looking for new subscribers to grow this YouTube family as much as I possibly can. So until then, I will see you next week, Monday. Again, if you want to find me live, every Monday we're doing book readings from 8 to 9, well, in this case, probably 9:15, something like that. But yeah, come hang out with me and let me read to you live. I love reading for you guys. So until then, stay hydrated, stay safe, and I will see you next week. Bye.